Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a Roster Books event here at the Blake Theatre. I have never done an introduction in this venue in the 16 years that I've worked for Roster Books, and just realising now that I've come out, I genuinely cannot see a single person. The lights are so bright. But this is a special occasion because I never dress up, but I happen to like Maggie Aderin so much, I put on a shirt. So this is about as well-dressed as you're ever going to find me, so be blessed. I don't really need to introduce Maggie, but I'm going to. Dame Maggie Aderin is a space scientist, author, and broadcaster. Over her career, she has created bespoke scientific instruments in both industrial and academic environments, including satellites that monitor climate change and contributed to the James Webb Space Telescope. In 2004, Maggie founded Science Innovation Limited, a company dedicated to inspiring the next generation of scientists and engineers, particularly from underrepresented backgrounds. She is a BAFTA-nominated TV presenter and is co-host of The Sky at Night, which you will all be aware of. Her contributions to the field have also earned her an Institute of Physics Gold Medal. She is the president of the British Science Association. She is Chancellor of the University of Leicester. More importantly, and you might not be aware of this, there is a Barbie doll made in her likeness. I think you've peaked, right? But maybe not, because in 2024, Maggie was knighted in the New Year's Honours List for her services to science, education, and diversity. She will be talking or being interviewed about her new book, Starchild. She has very kindly signed a few copies for us, so for those of you that don't want to wait around and meet and greet, you'll be able to pick up a signed copy, but please do hang around and meet Maggie at the end. Our interviewer this evening is Jo Durrant, a freelance event host and an interviewer. She also hosts her own independent award-winning arts and science podcast called Jo Durrant's Beautiful Universe. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome our speakers this evening.
Thank you very much, Rusty. And I'd say lovely to see you all, but I actually can't really see you. But I am reassured from the sound that we do have an audience with us this evening. It's my great pleasure to be in conversation with Dame Dr Maggie Aderin, and we will, of course, give you a chance to ask a question in our Q&A a little bit later on. Dame Dr Maggie Aderin has dreamed of going into space since the age of 3. She was inspired by the Clangers and later Star Trek. And while her childhood was spent moving around the country, her fascination with the universe remained her constant and sparked in her a deep desire and determination to succeed as a scientist. Now, in her memoir, Starchild, Maggie tells a story of education and prejudice, adversity and ambition, motherhood and the moon. This is a love letter to life and the universe and proof that crazy dreams can come true. And it's a great pleasure to be talking to Maggie this evening about it. Now, in the book, Maggie, you start by talking about the retrospectroscope.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
Yes. So I'm a scientific instrument maker, but usually my instruments are looking into deep, dark space or instruments that sort of look down at our planet. And so I decided that if I was going to look at my life so far, I wanted a scientific piece of equipment to help me along the way. And so I had a friend at one of my previous jobs who spoke about the retrospectroscope. And so we actually mocked one up. And so it's an imaginary piece of equipment, but it helps me look back in time and do analysis. And it's sometimes the signal is very strong because it's a strong memory, but other memories are sort of fleeting and sort of very nebulous and more of an emotion than actually a memory. But yes, the retrospectroscope helps me sort through them and understand some of my past.
Now, you've written other books previously, but what was the experience like of writing this book and looking back over your life to date?
So I have written a number of books, and they've all been sort of about, space, the stars, the universe, all the good stuff. And so it was very, very different, sort of turning, as I say, the retrospectroscope on myself. And it was quite an emotional journey. There've been I would describe my life as quite a roller coaster ride. But one of the things I also mentioned at the start of the book is that the fact that I am a space scientist and I'm doing what I'm doing, and the fact I've got a damehood still slightly blows my mind. And so I talk about sort of the multiverse, because I think that there's this idea that every decision you make leads to another decision. And I think the decisions that have enabled me to get here today, to be sitting in front of you, the probability was very slim. And so I thank the universe for giving me this opportunity. But as it's been quite an emotional night, it was quite a turbulent childhood, as I think we'll discuss. It was quite an emotional journey for me, sort of reliving some of the things. And even now, when I talk about them, when my father passed away, I still feel the emotion associated with that.
So what are some of your memories like then of your early life?
So it's quite interesting, because I thought my first memory was of my sister being born. And so I have a younger sister. Actually, I have three sisters. Two are older, one is younger, so I'm one of the middle children. And my younger sister, Gracie, I remember her being born because I was sort of 3.5, which I think is when sort of you can grasp hold of memories. And yeah, she was born at home, and I remember that she was called, until she was born, she was called the baby. And I was really excited about the baby coming along. And then when she was born, they said, oh yeah, this is Grace. And I said, who's Grace? Where's the baby? I mean, I don't know who this imposter is. And so and they washed her in a yellow bucket in the living room, and then she wasn't well, so she went. They put her in an incubator, and I remember seeing this sort of squirrly creature in this glass tube, and thinking, "This is Grace." But that was one of my first memories. But while writing the memoir, I did have a very very faint signal with the retrospectroscope about my mother sort of playing records to me, because one of the things is I've always been an insomniac, which it makes a lot of sense that I love space and astronomy, because I was always up late at night when everybody else was asleep. And so my mother used to play records to me, and Scarlet Ribbons was one of her favourite to play to me. And I have this memory of her all dressed up, wearing perfume, and me sort of lying on the bed. And I know that when I go to sleep, she's going to leave me. And so I'm trying my hardest. I must have been about 2.5 years old, trying my hardest to stay awake. But Scarlet Ribbons, sung by Harry Belafonte, who I met later, it's one of my earliest memories.
Now, your parents did separate when you were 4 years old. So what did that mean for you and your sisters?
Yes. And so I think this is where the chaos began. Because, yes, I was about 4. Gracie was barely a year old, and Sue and Hal were older. But my mother, I think, decided that she would leave, and what she suggested is that my 2 elder sisters go with my father, and that me and my younger sister Gracie, we would go with my mother. And my father helped set my mother up in a sweet shop, and I must admit I was sort of 4 years old and I thought, a sweet shop? I said, sherbet lemons. I was just, the idea of, I was just swimming in sherbet was really appealing. And so I went with my younger sister to live with my mother in the sweet shop.
But then you did spend periods of time, didn't you? Sometimes living with your mother, sometimes living with your father.
Yes.
How did you deal with those changes, Maggie?
Yes, and I think it's something that even older kids find challenging. And in the book, I mentioned sort of running away from home twice. And once was when I was quite young. And my father was quite determined that all 4 of us should live together. And so he was sort of encouraged me to sort of leave my mother and go and stay with Sue and Hal and himself. But that was quite hard on him. But then as my life went on, there were periods where I was with my mother, periods when I was with my father. And the problem was, I loved them both really dearly. And when I wasn't with one, I barely got to see the other. So when I was with one, I barely got to see the other. And so I found that really hard. I was a very emotional child. I think there are elements of that are still with me, but I mask them better now. And so this sort of a tearing of between parents, I found very challenging.
And how do you think maybe your fascination with the night sky and the universe helped you when you were navigating through all those times of uncertainty and change?
Yes, and it's quite odd because it's funny because looking back, I don't see it I don't see it as traumatic or anything like that. I know it was painful, but I love to mention that I think I had a sort of a relatively happy childhood. I was dearly loved by both my parents, and so I feel I'm very privileged in that respect. But my father was fascinated by space, astronomy, and everything out there. He described himself as a self-certified lunatic. I loved that. And so, and I'm a self-certified lunatic. It's hereditary. So my daughter, I think she's at the back of the auditorium. She's a self-certified lunatic too. And so my father was the one who introduced me to the moon and to space. But space was a way of transcending the challenges on Earth. And as an emotional child, it's being able to sort of look, have that perspective of up above, rising above the challenges. Because one of the things I felt as a child is I didn't really belong anywhere. There was the sort of the dichotomy between parents, but also there was the dichotomy of sort of who am I? Am I Nigerian? Am I British? My relatives would say, Maggie, you're a lost Nigerian. You've never been to Nigeria. You don't really know the country. And then some of the people I knew at school would say, why don't you go back home? Because I didn't belong here. And so space transcended all of that, because from space you don't see countries or barriers or anything like that. You just see our beautiful planet. And things like Star Trek. It started with the clangers, because I loved the clangers and the fact that they lived out in space. But Star Trek was also very much part of that. With Star Trek, it was a group of people from all over the world, but working, collaborating together, literally sort of traveling to the stars. And so that set my goal very high at a very early age. I wanted to travel to the stars too.
And did you also feel with something like Star Trek that there weren't maybe the same boundaries and the way we kind of classify people here on Earth?
Yes, because it was Star Trek, it was the United Federation of Planets, and I loved that. Not only was it Earth, and Earth was united, but we were united with many other aliens, species, everything out there. And so that was really appealing. And also, one of my role models at an early age, there was Lieutenant Uhura, who, she was absolutely wonderful. But there was also Spock. And Spock, of course, was unemotional. And I thought, if only I could be like Spock, then I wouldn't be crying all the time and a blubbery mess. Because I felt my emotions were almost overrunning me. And so Spock was definitely a sort of something I aspired to be. A sort of quiet, logical, and sort of with emotions in check.
Now, you did change schools a number of times, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
How do you think that's shaped you as a person?
So I didn't realise until actually just before my daughter was born, because I did a wonderful programme on Radio 4 called Desert Island Discs. And this happened when I was heavily pregnant with my daughter Laurie. And I went in, and what I didn't realise is they do a lot of research. And so we sat down, we had lots of chats. And it turned out I went to 13 different schools when I was growing up. And it came as a sort of happening, because none of my sisters went to that many. And it's funny because I do lots of public speaking and go out to schools. And when I say this to some kids, they look at me in horror and say, how naughty were you? It wasn't like that. It wasn't like that. because of this ongoing custody battle, whereas sometimes with my mum, sometimes with my dad, it meant that I just racked up the schools. Some schools just closed. I didn't touch them. But it meant that I ended up going to 13 different schools. And it's funny, with the retrospectroscope, I can look at that now and see that there's a yin and a yang, and I see the yin and the yang in most things. And I'm definitely a glass half full sort of person. And it means that I am used to sort of change and fitting in and sort of looking for opportunities in the situations I'm in. But it also means that I find, so some people have sort of lifelong friends, and I have a few, but because everything was chopped up and moving around, as educationally as well as sort of in terms of relationships, I find that I can be a bit transitory. So yeah, again, the yin and the yang.
Now, you did go to boarding school during that time. What was that experience like?
Well, it's quite interesting because the sister directly above me was Helen, but we called her Hal, and she was the brain box. And and she was also my role model. I wanted to be more like Hal, and she was very clever. She loved reading, and she got a scholarship to go to Christ's Hospital. So she went to boarding school, and then my big elder sister Sue got an opportunity to go to boarding school, and so my father said, would you be interested? And that's what big kids do. Yeah, I'd love to. And so I was only 7 at the time, and I don't think I really thought it through. It's a bit like the sherbet lemons, really, because my father was such an influence in my life. And to be away from him and bereft of him was more of a shock than I realised. But yes, at 7 years old, I sort of went off to boarding school, and it was a shock to the system. Although the school, they were lovely. It was they had day girls who we poo-pooed. Day girls, yes, they're not like us tough boarders. But it was an eye-opener, because I'd never been away from home for an extended period of time, and because my father now had custody of 4 daughters, and he was trying to keep us all in boarding schools. He was working 24/7, and that was hard on him, definitely. And so often we wouldn't go home for the holidays, and so I was. You had the day girls, the boarders, and then the lifers, and I was one of the lifers. So spending quite a few holidays at school as well.
And they had quite strict times of going to bed, didn't they? Which I imagine for you, as somebody who said, I'm a bit of an insomniac, I want to be out stargazing, that must have been quite difficult.
Yes, and it was actually the worst time was actually this time of year, when we're in sort of glorious summer, and you are sent to bed at 7 o'clock, and it's light outside for you, a good 3 hours. Each dormitory had a prefect who would sort of keep an eye on things. And I explained this to my father, and he said, "Don't worry, I've got you." And he gave me a torch and some extra batteries. And so when everybody else fell asleep and I was still awake, I'd be under the blankets with me books, sort of reading. And you can't sit up too quick, obviously you let the light out, so turn it off. But yeah, so he equipped me so I could survive that.
Now, you had undiagnosed dyslexia, didn't you?
Yes.
For a number of years. How were you treated by the teachers, Maggie?
Well, that was quite interesting, because I was only formally diagnosed with dyslexia last year, actually, when I was writing the memoir. I thought I've said I'm dyslexic because I thought I was dyslexic, but it's something I thought it needed to be tested. So I got formally tested, and yes, I am dyslexic. It's funny, my daughter that's at the back, she got tested when she was 8 because she showed signs of it. And when I said I was going to be tested, she said, "Mum, don't do it. What if you're not dyslexic? The game's up." It's okay. But it turned out that not only I'm dyslexic, but it was a buy one, get one free offer. And so I found out I was dyslexic, but I also have ADHD. Who knew? But in terms of education, it was quite challenging for me, because dyslexia I definitely see as my superpower. But again, it's that yin and the yang thing. And when you first go to school, it's all about reading and writing. And those are things, as a dyslexic, I find really hard. When I'm giving speeches or writing reports, that it is littered with spelling mistakes, although spelling checkers and AI really help now. But because of that, the teachers just saw a slightly odd child who couldn't read very well and couldn't spell very well, and assumed that I was a bit dumb, really. And so I was often at the back of the class for most of the schools I was at. And, I like to say, with the safety scissors and the glue, keeping me occupied rather than because academia didn't seem like the sort of thing that I would do.
And you mentioned spell checkers there. This is going on further in time. But wasn't it when you were doing your PhD, you had somebody that would check things? You said sometimes the spell checker will correct things, and it's totally the wrong or the most inappropriate word.
And I give two classic examples of that. The one thing was for my PhD, I was looking at oil films in very, very high pressure contacts, and we were using something called the disc machine. And unfortunately, I spelt it incorrectly, and the spelling checker got it, and it came out as the dick machine, which is a whole new PhD. And the other one was for my honeymoon. I sent out an email inviting all my friends to come out and do some gentle cruising, which I thought would be lovely. But I did it in a hurry, and I sent it out. And I got some rather questioning emails. "Maggie, what's genital cursing?" Because gentle cruising had been converted to genital cursing. I think they thought it was some sort of African ritual. Come on, let's do something of that. But yes, it was definitely gentle cruising that I was after. Yeah, so spelling checkers are a mixed bag, really.
Now, you had a careers chat, didn't you, at about the age of 10 with one of your teachers, and you said, "I want to be an astronaut," which makes sense, your love of stargazing. What did the teacher say to you?
Yes, and so it's quite interesting, because what the teacher actually said is, "Oh, Maggie, with your academics, that's not going to happen. Why don't you go into nursing? Because that's quite scientific." And nursing is a brilliant career, but it's not what made my heart sing. And so now when I go out and speak to kids and I tell them my story and talk to them about space and astronomy, I tell them to reach for the stars and have a big, crazy dream. And because I may never get into space, but just by having the aspiration has enabled me to do things I would have never thought possible. And so I think the teacher had the best intentions in mind, but I think we should be raising our, I call it the desire to aspire. Kids need it, but we all need it in our lives. Something to aim for, something that's big and glorious that we can sort of throw ourselves at and try and get there.
And at one point you attended a convent school, didn't you? There's a lovely anecdote in the book. Can you tell us how you describe the nuns?
Yes. Well, it's quite interesting because in this convent school, this was when I was in Hastings, so I was probably about, 12, 13, 14 years old. And so I was living in Hastings and I was sent to a convent school. And we had two sorts of nuns. So there were the nuns that came out and sort of were teaching us. But then I think there was a silent habit. I don't know if that's what it's called. But we used to call them the clockwork nuns because they'd wear the full habit and it just looked, you couldn't see their feet moving. So they'd sort of just glide in amongst us and so, there goes a clockwork nun, you're done with it. But they were very sweet. But yes, I think because they were silent order, I think that's the term. They didn't say anything and just sort of just glided through it. So I always have this image of these nuns sort of scooting around. They probably had roller skates underneath. They were probably having fun.
That was a great way to get around, isn't it, really? Let's be honest. Around this time, you talk about having speech and drama lessons. How do you think that's helped you?
Yes, and it's quite interesting because I mentioned that I'm dyslexic and I mentioned sort of some of the challenges that I face because of that. But it's funny that with the dyslexia, I'm not very good. Writing books is really hard for me. But in fact, the ADHD makes it worse because I procrastinate horribly. And my worst case scenario is, for instance, with this book, it was advertised on Amazon before I'd sort of finished writing it. And it's that moment of, oh my goodness, it's out there and I haven't earned it. So that's the moment of panic. But I still find it sort of challenging to write, but there were some very strong positives about the dyslexia. I'm very curious, I'm logical, I'm empathetic, or just pathetic as my daughter would say, but empathetic. But also good verbal communication. And so I do lots of public speaking and things like that. And I think that started in Hastings with my mother doing these speech and drama exams, sort of going on a stage and reading a poem or something like that. And so, yes, the seeds of that were set at an early age. And at one point, I considered being an actress because I love, sort of engaging an audience and sort of making people laugh and things like that. And my eldest sister, Sue, is an actress, a very successful actress. And so I thought, maybe I should go into acting too. But yes, science seemed like a safer route.
And your mum was on television, wasn't she?
She was. She used to do, I suppose it was the equivalent of Loose Women in the 1980s. And it was local to, we were living in Hastings then. And it was called, what was it called? A house party. And sort of a group of women would come in and they'd share recipes and sort of have a chat. Yes, and she was on that. So, and it's quite interesting because people say that I think sometimes people's parents are your initial role models. And my mum was on TV, my father set up his own business. And so I've sort of followed in both of their footsteps in some ways.
Now, one of the themes in the book is about reinventing yourself, being a chameleon, you call it. One example was when you moved schools before your GCSEs and they said to you, what stream should you be in? What did you do, Maggie?
Yes. So most of my education, I've been at the back of the class. And for a long time, I felt that I didn't like school and school didn't like me. But there was a problem with that because my father saw education as the great social leveller. If you did well in education, you were set for life. And so the fact that I was at the back of the class, I felt as if I was disappointing my father. And also, I had this crazy dream. I want to be a space scientist. I want to go into space. And education seemed to be a good route for doing that. And so when I got to my 13th school, just before I was meant to start my GCSEs, they came up and, as you say, they asked me, what stream should you be in? All my life, I'd been at the back of the class, the low of the low, but they didn't have my previous records. They didn't know who I was. And so I said, I should be in top stream. I suggested I should be in top stream, and they did. They put me in top stream. And I thought, this is my chance. And so I threw myself at it. I threw myself at education. And I didn't watch TV for 2 years, and that's when Dallas was on, because I thought this was my opportunity to actually get an education, and perhaps, some of those crazy dreams might come true.
And you really threw yourself, as you say, into your studies, but did you know at that point, okay, it's science, this is the route I want to go down?
Yes, and I think, because it's funny, because I can't remember a time where I wasn't fascinated by space. And it's quite interesting, because I did look at a number of different ways of how to get into space. So at one point I thought, oh, maybe I should join the Air Force, because most of the astronauts I'd heard about, people like sort of Neil Armstrong, were test pilots. So I thought, maybe that's the route. But I don't think I would have done very well there. And then also I thought, oh, perhaps I should go and learn Russian. But I was having difficulty with English, so Russian was off the key. So I just kept on trying to find different routes. But science seemed to be the things that got people out there. If I could be a space scientist, a rocket scientist, maybe if one of the astronauts dropped out, I could step in and go into space. And so science, and also I think with the dyslexia, although I didn't realise that at the time, but with the retrospectroscope, I can see that some of my strengths lay in logic, in curiosity, in that sort of skill, rather than sort of reading and writing or sort of remembering numbers for history. And so I think I had an aptitude with the logic for science, and also science got people out there. So yes, it was definitely, it was almost a no-brainer for me. Definitely had to be science.
And tell us about joining the telescope making class.
Yes. So when I was about 14, by this time, when I started my GCSEs, I ran away from home and went to live with my father again. And it's funny, you sort of running away from home for your education is an odd thing to do as a 14-year-old. But I was living with my father, and I was loving it because we were very close, and we studied together, which I also loved. And I used to watch Sky at Night. And with Sky at Night, Patrick would say, this is what you can see in the night sky, but of course with a telescope you can see this. And I go, oh, telescope. And so I went and bought one. So at this time I was living with my father in a council flat, so he didn't have much money. He was on benefit and he was losing his sight. So I was sort of a carer for him. But we didn't have much money. And so I went and bought this telescope from Argos, and it was quite cheap, and it had plastic lenses, and it suffered from something called chromatic aberration. So as you point it up to the night sky, the image would come through, but it would split it into different colours. And so I was really disappointed, but we couldn't afford anything else. But I was looking through a magazine, and there was an adult education class, and it was a telescope making class. I thought, you can make a telescope? And so what I hadn't realised, and someone reminded me recently, was that I actually had to get special permission, because I was just 14 and it was an adult education class. I had to get permission from my school and also from my father, because he couldn't bring me because he was losing his sight, but to go to this adult education class. And so I remember the first day, sort of knocking on the door and going inside and looking around, and everyone was male, and I thought the average age was about 50. I was 14, so everybody looked just really old. I don't think they were probably in 25 and 30, but relative to me, they looked really old. But it was quite lovely because we all had one thing in common. We wanted to make our own telescope so we could see the night sky better. And so it was a bit of I was definitely a nerdy sort of a teenager. But yes, I used to grind and polish my own telescope mirror. And I like to say it's not a simple thing to do. The process is relatively straightforward, but it does take a long time. It took months. And in fact, I started when I was 14, and I was still perfecting the optics when I was at university. So yes, it was a lifelong. It's funny because my daughter's just turned 16, and I'm tempted to make another telescope. But it is it's also a very relaxing thing to do. I used to grind and polish my telescope mirror while watching Star Trek. So aspiration.
We know you love Star Trek. I know you also love Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
One of my favourite films.
How would you say that science fiction, maybe reading science fiction, has maybe inspired you in your storytelling?
Yes. Oh, actually, very much so. I once gave a talk, and it was titled "How Science Fiction Saved My Life," because growing up, the dyslexia was undiagnosed, but I knew that I really didn't like reading. It was very hard work. It took a lot of processing. And also when you first start reading, the books are so boring. Read book one and things like that, just really dull tales. But my sister Hal, the clever one, she used to tell me about the science fiction books she read. And I think, oh my goodness, it opened up a world of wonder. And so that was my ingress to reading. Science fiction books, it was worth the effort. And so that's how science fiction saved my life. But also, science fiction, I love, to me, good science fiction is science fiction that is based on something we almost know and understand, but then extrapolates it. Because it's something that you think, oh my goodness, this could be possible. And it's a bit like the multiverse, this idea that every decision. With science fiction, you're exploring different possibilities. Some of it dystopian, some of it sort of a utopian, and it's looking at everything else in between. So with Star Trek, people think that, you know, the communicators they had inspired our mobile phones. So also I think it sort of sets a benchmark of things we can aspire to in the future.
And you've been an advisor, haven't you, on a programme, on a drama programme?
Actually, a couple, yes.
Yeah.
And it's been really, it's been lovely to do. And so the one was on the BBC called Paradox, and another one was on Sky One, and oh gosh, it was called Intergalactic? Yes. And so Paradox was about some satellites which are up in space. And there's a space scientist, and he's receiving these images from the satellites. And what he's realizing is that they're from the future. And so, we never quite explain it, but somehow this satellite is picking up images from the future, and it means he can stop crimes and do things. But that was fascinating because I would sit with the guy who was playing the space scientist, and it just sort of looked at me, and I was like, oh yeah, and so the universe looks like this. And then he'd copy me. I was like, oh my goodness. And so he was trying to work out, what a space scientist would do. And lots of drawings, in my case anyway. And then the other one was, Intergalactic. And when I heard the title, I must admit my stomach fell. Because interstellar is hard enough, but intergalactic, travelling from one galaxy to another. To put that into perspective, travelling from our local star to the next door neighbour star, Proxima Centauri, would currently take 76,000 years. And that's just the start of the 300 billion in our galaxy. So to go to another galaxy was... But anyway, they found a nice way of the Alcubierre drive. This Mexican physicist has come up with a way of warping space and time. So you don't travel faster than the speed of light, but you concertina space and time in front of you and elongate it behind you so you can travel these vast distances. And so they latched onto that, which was lovely. And yes, but again, sort of looking at the stories and being involved, because I see myself as a storyteller. I think that's part of my dyslexic traits. And so to do this, but for many millions of people, was lovely.
So let's go back into your educational journey then, Maggie. What was your path to studying for a degree in physics?
Yes. And so for my physics was the subject for me, really, because I'm very curious, very inquisitive, and physics to me is the study of everything. From the tiniest particles, they're looking at the Large Hadron Collider, to the cosmos itself and the outskirts of the universe. And so, as a curious person, I think physics was, it's the ultimate playground. So that made a lot of sense to me. But to my father, when he realised that he had a scientist on board and I was doing well in the sciences, he thought, perfect, medicine, because for him, he came to the UK and he wanted to study medicine, but didn't really get the chance. And so he thought, oh yes, my daughter Maggie, she'll go into medicine. And so it was quite a hard conversation I had with him when I said, Dad, I don't think I want to do medicine. There were a number of reasons. It's not what made my heart sing, but also as a very emotional person, I thought that if I lost a patient, I would lose it, literally. And so I thought I couldn't take on that emotional burden. And so physics seemed to be the solution. Physics is logical and distant, but with lots of passion as well. And so, that was a hard conversation. But I decided that I wanted to study physics. And and so I applied for a number of different universities and to try and study physics.
And so you went to Imperial College in London, and we've heard earlier you like to reinvent yourself, Maggie, but you had a bit of a problem when you went there, didn't you, in terms of your reinvention?
Yes, and so I'd been focused on education. So from the 14, I sort of did my GCSEs, went and did my A-levels, very much focused on education. But I thought, maybe I want to be a sort of slightly different Maggie. And so I applied to Imperial College. And now Imperial College was a special place to me, because as a child I used to go to the Science Museum and go to the Space Gallery there. And in the Space Gallery they had the rockets and things like that. And of course Imperial College is right next door to the Science Museum. So you used to think, oh, that's where the clever people go. Maybe in a crazy dream I might be able to get there one day. So the fact that I went to Imperial was a bit of a dream come true anyway. But when I applied to Imperial, one of my friends at school, who I was also doing A-level physics with, so there were only 2 of us in the whole school who wanted to do A-level physics, and we used to have to go to the boys' school to do it. And so there was something called Le Swap, which is so there was a boy who used to come and do biology with us, and me and Margarita would go to the boys' school to do physics. But then Margarita decided she wanted to apply to Imperial and do physics too. And so my transformation was a bit stunted because she knew she knew the old nerdy Maggie. So I couldn't turn into a new one. And we sort of did our first year together, but then we sort of diverted ways. But also I stayed on and did my PhD at Imperial as well. So I was there for a total of 7 years, almost a lifer again.
And one thing you did decide is what you're going to wear. Now we know you wear lovely, amazing clothes now, but you had quite a set idea, didn't you, of what you were going to wear when you went to university?
Yes. And so it was when I went to GCSEs and then went through sixth form at the same school, and I thought that I have to focus on education because, you know, if I was going to survive this, I needed to focus on education. And so I decided that I would continue a uniform. Now, in London, in Camden, there used to be a shop called Lawrence Corner, and they used to sell army surplus, so Air Force Army surplus clothes. And so I went and bought 2 jumpers in sort of a navy blue, and with lapels, for putting your beret in and things like that, and elbow patches. I thought, I have 2 of those. Sorry, my watch likes to join in. Shush, quiet. And I'd get sort of 2 of those, and then sort of 2 pairs of jeans, and that would be my daily wear. And so now I love clothes, but at that time I thought, focus on education because obviously you're not going to survive this. And so that was my uniform through most of university. But by the time I got to the 3rd year, I branched out.
And something else you branched out to doing was doing a bit of travelling. You went interrailing, didn't you, at one point? And another theme in the book is the kindness of strangers. So how did the kindness of strangers help you on your interrailing adventures?
Yes. And so interrailing, my father had always travelled and I wanted to follow in his footsteps, although he was a little, I think he thought I was quite vulnerable and sort of not very worldly wise. And so when I said I wanted to go travelling, he wasn't keen, but I thought I would go interrailing, and with a university friend, a chap called Gideon, I would go travel the world. I wanted to get to Africa especially. And so the interrail ticket went into Morocco. And so we started travelling together, but we had a few adventures. And one of the most challenging adventures was we were on a train, sort of going back towards Paris. So we'd done most of our trip. We'd been out for maybe about 6 weeks, heading back sort of towards Paris and then on to London. And we were on a train, and it came, I think it had come from Morocco, and it was travelling through Spain. And I got into a situation where I was in a carriage with lots of strangers. I was trying to get back to my seat, but I had my money belt on me, and I felt a little vulnerable. So I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is to try and get through the train much quicker. When we get to the next station, I'll hop off the train and sort of travel up the train on ground much quicker, and then hop back on. And so that was the plan. But as the train was slowing down, I thought, I'll just hop off early. Now, the train wasn't as slow as I thought, so I hopped off the train, sort of tumbled a bit, only to pick myself up and see that the train wasn't actually stopping at this stop. And it just picked up speed and disappeared. You cannot imagine my anguish. Because not only that, I'd left Gideon on board, who was asleep, so didn't know where I was. I'd left my passport stuffed between 2 seats. He didn't even know it was there. So I'm in Spain with just my money belt, no passport, nothing else, no clothes, just my money belt. And the train has just gone off with my ticket and everything else. And so it's quite interesting because I think this taught me that I can rely on myself. Because my gut reaction was to sit there in the dust and blub. But I thought, I have to get myself together. And so what I did is I spoke to the conductor on the platform, and tried. And the thing is, my Spanish is non-existent. My English is challenging enough, let alone Spanish. So, but what I did find is everywhere I went, people would say, "Oh, okay. Well, my wife speaks Spanish, and I speak sort of they'd find a 3-way communication system. So they'd try and explain my situation. And I remember sort of being in a station and someone saying, "Okay, you have to stay here overnight because there's another train tonight, but here, have some mint tea and you can stay here and you'll be safe. And so every time I felt I was vulnerable, there was someone there to help. And I think that is fundamentally human nature. I think sometimes we are incredibly beastly to each other, but I think when someone sees someone vulnerable, and I think individually we try and help. And that's definitely what I found. And I did team up with Gideon again. He had found my passport and we met up in Paris, but I think I shaved years off his life.
Imagine you've just woken up and thinking, what's going on?
Maggie's not here. And so, I mean, he found the passport. Good on him. He's a good chap.
You went on to study your PhD. You said you were at Imperial for 7 years in total.
Yes.
And you moved into the world of mechanical engineering.
Yes.
How did you navigate this world, Maggie? Because it was pretty male-dominated.
Well, actually, physics was quite male-dominated, but mechanical engineering was even more so. And it's funny because I didn't find that a barrier at all. I was aware of it, but I didn't see it as a barrier because I think I was just so focused on sort of that education goal. And so, but one of the things I did find alien was mechanical engineering itself. And so my first 3 years of study at Imperial were in physics, and we used what we call SI units, so meters, sort of kilograms, sort of the standard units of science. And then when I got into mechanical engineering, they started talking about pounds per square inch. I thought, what? And, it's like, yes, furlongs per fortnight. I felt as if I'd stepped back in time into this sort of archaic place. And they did use SI units as well. And so there was an adjustment. But yes, I got used to it. And but also, I was a physicist. They were mechanical engineers. And most of the people in my group were mechanical engineers. And so I think they were aware that I wasn't, that I didn't know some things. But every so often, they'd be aware that I know things that they don't. But I think there is a joy in sort of pooling resources, where I bring my knowledge, they bring their knowledge, and we make progress much faster and more progress when we actually sort of mix things up a bit.
Now, there have been times you talk about in the book where people have made incorrect assumptions about you. Can you give us an example and tell us how you've dealt with that?
And so actually the PhD is a prime example because actually one of the things I loved about sort of studying was we were in a sort of a cohort, a group, and there were the PhD students, and we'd all go to lunch together, and it was just nice being in a gang like that. But I remember one day, so we all went to lunch, and we went. It's funny, I lost a lot of weight at this time because, as I mentioned, it was very male-dominated, and many of the people in my group were rowers, and so they rowed so every day, and they would consume calories, and so we'd go to lunch together, and I'd sort of put my plate down, and I'd sort of start eating my food, and I was like, "Are you going to eat that sausage?" No, it would be gone. And so, but it was lovely, a lovely group. But one day we had someone come from a foreign university, and we were all sitting there chatting, and then he turned to me and said, so whose secretary are you? And there was a moment of silence where everybody thought, forks went down, move the knives out of the way, just in case. And it's funny, I thought about it, and I thought there's nothing wrong with being a secretary, because we had some great secretaries in the group, but the problem was the assumption. And so, seeing, I suppose, a black female as part of the cohort that made the assumption. But I also think that it's how you respond to it. And so you could say, how dare you? But I don't think, to me, it's just about perhaps in his experience, that's what he's seen. Black women were the secretarial staff. So to me, it's about a re-education and not about chastising or anything like that. So I sort of very calmly said, no, I'm actually doing my PhD here. It's all about this. And we started chatting about that. And so everybody, sigh of relief, then I was go back on the table. And that's what I've generally found. It's being angry about it or aggressive about it, I think is actually can be unhelpful, because that's what people take away. Oh, she was angry and she made me feel bad. Whereas if you say, no, you've made an assumption, but it's an incorrect one, and this is the case, and then they go away and think, okay. And when they meet the next black female in a university, maybe they won't make the same assumption. So that's what I try and go for. And yes, I've never used a knife yet.
Can you tell us about the Newsnight incident? I know you've been on Newsnight many times, but this particular time there was a pretty unpleasant newspaper article that came out afterwards.
Yes. And so, this was myself. It was. It's funny because I do sort of quite a few news shows, or I have done in the past, and working one's strengths and weaknesses, I think, is one of the things I've definitely learned, and I talk about in the book, because sometimes when I'm doing a news show, I get in and they're about to interview me, and sometimes it's a subject I know and love, and I love to talk about it, but other times it's sort of a subject sort of on the periphery of my knowledge, and I know I'm in a bad situation where in the introduction they talk about everything I know about the subject, and they've done it in the intro, and they turn to me and say, "So Maggie, tell us more," and I think, whoa, yeah, you just covered it all, mate. That's all I know. Yeah, I'm on vapors here, mate. And I was in this situation on Newsnight, and I had a wonderful scientist, Perez. I can't remember. I think Herinda Perez, another female scientist, and we were talking about a discovery that had been made. I think trying to understand dark matter. And it was great because this is Jeremy Clarkson and Jeremy Paxman. Got to get the right Jeremy. Makes a lot of difference. This is Jeremy Paxman. He is. Although Laurie scared him. Sorry, this is a total aside. But once I was doing Newsnight, and I used to take, this is many years ago at the BBC, and I used to take Laurie in with me. And sometimes people would hold her while I was on air, and then I'd collect her afterwards. And I was doing Newsnight, and Jeremy Paxman came in and said, "Whose baby is this?" And Laurie just turned around and looked at him like this. He said, never mind, he's going off. And that's one of the things I'm so proud of Laurie. At sort of 3 years old, she could scare Jeremy Paxman. But so Jeremy Paxman, I've done Newsnight with him a few times, and he said, "Okay, Maggie, over to you. Why don't you ask the scientists questions?" So we had a scientist who'd made a discovery on Newsnight, but sort of remotely. And I thought, I've got to ask them questions? That's your job. And so I wasn't too sure what to ask. But then, yes, this horrible article came out that, we sort of, the BBC was trying to be politically correct by having two women ask a male scientist about their work. And again, you can get sort of uppity about it. But I made a joke of it, and I said, yes, I can imagine the BBC flipping through their Rolodex. Oh, no, it's a white male. Aha, we have two. And so it was just a silly situation. But it was quite interesting because both Herinda and I were part of UCL, or have been part of the UCL community. Now, UCL is a lovely place, University College London, and they were the first university, I think, in the UK to accept women. And when they saw this, they went to battle. They were not getting away with this. And so they wanted what had been said. So it was a very small piece, it's sort of a paragraph or two, but they wanted it retracted, and they wanted a formal apology to both Herinda and I. And so, yes, and so I got an apology from the Daily Mail, and I couldn't work out where to put it at home, so I put it up in the loo. As a little reminder. But yes.
I mean, how big a problem has prejudice been in your life, Maggie, would you say?
I think I'm definitely a glass half full person. And so I think, also, because of education, I have been in a sort of a fairly rarefied atmosphere. And it's quite interesting because as a black person, I think I've been quite lucky in that way. It has happened occasionally, but not very often. And I don't get sort of very much blatant racism, whereas I think people in other situations might. And to me, it's like, I call it death by 1,000 cuts. If it's happening to you in your everyday life almost constantly, it must wear you down. And there's been a few incidents, but as I say, very few. And it's also always trying to work out how to handle them. I think sometimes it's miscommunication, been very rarely blatant racism. And when it's like that, it's quite scary. I remember when I was pregnant with Laurie, there was a sort of a series of comments on a website. It was effectively trolling. Saying the BBC's claim that this black woman is a space scientist. What are they on about? And I kept thinking, I'm pregnant with Laurie. If they come, I can't run away. But So they said this, and then one person chipped in and said, "Oh, but she went to Imperial College." "Ah, Imperial College, what's that?" "Well, it's the second best university in the world." And so it was effectively trolling, but it was quite scary. It was very racially motivated, and so I think it's good to be aware that that's out there, but I haven't encountered it very often.
Now, from making your own telescope, you've got to work on some of the world's most important, significant ones, like Gemini and, of course, more recently, the James Webb Space Telescope. What do you think little Maggie would have to say about all of this?
I think, if the retrospect worked both ways, and I could go back and whisper in her ear, I think she'd be gobsmacked that the crazy dreams that she's having might actually come true. But what I'd also to say to her is, have that crazy dream, have that dream, that desire to go into space. Because by having it, you're doing things, it enables you to transcend barriers. I always say that one of the things about life is a successful life isn't about not failing. To me, a successful life is about how you pick yourself up when you do fail, because failure is bound to happen to all of us at some point. And so, and for me, I think with the dyslexia and things like that, the failures happened early. And so I was able to train myself and train my resilience. But also, I think when you have a crazy dream, like you're traveling out to the next door neighbour's star even, then it means that when things do go wrong, you can pick yourself up and you lament the fact that I got a D in my A-level physics, but yet still managed to get into Imperial. So you lament the loss, but at the same time, the dream helps you pick yourself up. You say, that wasn't very nice. Okay, we're not taking that route because that's horrible. Let's try another route. And so it enables you to find the opportunities to get to where you want to go.
Now, you spent some time in Chile, didn't you, because of your work on telescopes. I just wonder how this particular period in your life, because you were grieving the loss of your father, weren't you? How spending time, particularly in the mountains in Chile, helped you through that time?
Yes. And so my father, passed away. And when he did, it was... I say that when I was writing the book, the emotions still flow, and it still does today, because we were so close. And I think he was such an inspiration for me, and he gave me the ability to think. I don't think you can ask for a better gift from anyone than the ability to think, to question, to be curious. And he gave me all of that. And when he passed away, I sort of designed his tombstone, and on it I put father, brother, teacher, philosopher, friend, because those are all the things that he represented to me. And so his loss was devastating. But going out and working, and that's one of the things I found, when we were going through the upheaval of my childhood, if I can divert my focus, it really helps. And so when I was a child, I used to look after my little sister. And so little Gracie, as long as she was happy, then I was okay. And so any angst I was feeling, I could divert and sort of, no, I've got to look after Gracie, I've got to be strong. And in fact, when my father died, Gracie wasn't well. And so again, there was that diversion. But when I actually got out to Chile and I was under the night sky, I could just think about him. And I don't know, wish him well in whatever he was doing now. But it was having, I suppose, that moment, that moment of stillness under the glorious night sky, to actually thank him, really, for all the wonder he has given me. So yes, it really helped being out there.
And what made you want to do more science communication?
Yes. No, it's funny because science communication was not something I had even heard of. When I was at Imperial, we did something called the Pimlico Connection, which is where physics students, went out to local schools and spoke to the kids about science and what we were doing and things like that. But I used to call it the dinner party test, because what I'd do is if I went to a dinner party and I'd be sitting next to someone and I'd say, oh, yeah, so what do you do? And they'd tell me, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So what do you do? Oh, I'm a scientist. And you could see them withdraw. And the shadow falling, I've got a scientist. What am I going to say to her? But then I'll start talking to them. I say, well, I'm actually a space scientist. And what I do is I build these satellites and they look at our planet and they help us understand climate change. And things like that. I say, oh, that's really interesting. I thought you'd be really boring. No. And so I think sometimes it was sort of selling the science. And also one of the other challenges I was facing, I was working as a space scientist, which I thought, a pretty cool job, up there with brains. If you were doing top trumps of jobs, well, the space scientist would be up there, with brain surgeon. But what I was finding is when I was putting job adverts out and trying to look to recruit the next generation, I wasn't getting anyone taking up the gauntlet. So I decided that I wanted to go out there and tell people that as a space scientist, I'm making a real difference to planet Earth. I'm hopefully making a contribution to sort of human knowledge, but at the same time, we're helping our planet with disaster monitoring and sort of looking at climate change and all these things that we do from space that enhances our planet. And so I thought, what I need to do is go out and tell people, because it's okay to do it, but if no one knows you're doing it, then why would they come on board? So I decided, and also science can be, especially physics, can be still very male-dominated. So, and science thrives with diversity, different ideas from different people coming together. So I wanted to encourage more girls into science, more people from different ethnicities into science. So I decided I'd do that. And so I got some funding from an organisation called P-Park at the time, and it was about sort of about a few £1,000s sort of to go out to schools. And I wrote to sort of some of my local schools saying, "Hello, my name's Dr Maggie, and I'm a space scientist, and I'd love to come to your school and give a talk." No one. Absolutely no one responded. And so, but I got my foot in the door in the first school, and it went really well. But what I found is it's trying to find the right hooks. So sometimes I speak to sort of toddlers, and sometimes I have to be careful because I come in and say, "Hello, I'm Maggie," and the toddlers just sort of look at me and say, "Oh yeah, dial it down, they're very young. Hello, let's start with something familiar. How about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Does anyone know that?" And so we say Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star together. So, okay, so what is a star? And then we start to, so it's trying to find the right hooks for the different age groups. And but things, it's something I really so enjoy doing. And hopefully I think the kids get something out of it, but I get so much out of it. And also it's working to my skill set, because with the dyslexia, writing is hard, and so essays are hard, but speaking to people and finding the right emotional hooks as well. And so I tell them my story. And it's quite interesting about role models. Because one of the things it took me a while to get my head around is the fact that people sometimes see me as a role model. And some kids have come up to me and said, "You came to my school and now I'm studying physics, so it just feels so wonderful." But as a role model, I thought I had to be perfect, and I know I'm not. And so often I turn up at school, I'm a bit late because of the ADHD. I'm a bit chaotic. I can't find my slides because of the dyslexia, and often I've got jam down my tongue. And, because I'm just mucky. And so when I got to a school, I used to think, oh no, I should be portraying this perfection. But what I realised is that if I do turn up at a school and I'm a bit late, messy, and got jam down my top, then the kids think, if she can do that, what can I do? Role models, I think, are much more effective if they are accessible. And so that's why I like to talk about my dyslexia. I like to talk about the challenges I faced, because then they think, oh, it's not someone who's perfect and is able to do everything, but it's someone who's real, like me, and so maybe I can do something too. And I like to get that message out to everyone. We're all role models, and we all have something to share. And so, but when people see our imperfections as well, I think we're more effective.
And something I think many people relate to is juggling lots of different roles. And at one point you created this lovely portfolio career, but you were doing 3 different jobs. And then, of course, you became a mum. So how did you find that balance?
Yes, and it was quite interesting because, yes, and so I was working as a space scientist and working on some big projects. And so we were putting a bid in for the James Webb Space Telescope to do one of the instruments on the Space Telescope. And that was a sort of multi-million-pound sort of project. And I was leading the actual sort of, the purchase order effectively to put the ideas to the European Space Agency. So I was doing that, but then I started doing the science communications because I'd got some funding and I was loving doing that, but that was juggling in itself. And I was doing the science communication through UCL, and by then I'd set up Science Innovation, my own company, so I was doing that. So that was a 3-way job. And then on top of that, I fell pregnant. Now, I find kids magical. And so I thought to have one of my own would just be, but I was juggling all these different things. And so when Laurie was born, I thought, okay, what will happen is she'll go to university. I'm getting ahead of myself. She'll go to nursery. She'll go to nursery, and then I'd sort of continue very much as I was before. But when she was born, a profound change happened in me, and I wanted to spend as much time as I could with her, because this was this magical creature, and I wanted to be there to protect her and nurture her and look after her. And so by working, because I was working at 8 till 7 as a space scientist, I thought she'd spend all her time in nursery and I wouldn't be able to spend that quality time with her. So what I did is I phased down the space science and phased up the science communication, because with the science communication it meant that she could travel with me. And so for the first 4 years of my daughter's life, her carbon footprint was bigger than her, because we went all around the world and made a documentary for the BBC. And so yes, but it meant that we were together, and I loved that.
And she scared Jeremy Paxman as well.
Yeah, I know. Yes.
So how did the role on The Sky at Night come about, Maggie?
Yes. And so with The Sky at Night, as I say, I watched it as a child, and there was a magic in Patrick's words about what you could see in the night sky. And even growing up in London with the light pollution, a bit like that here actually, slightly dazzled with the light pollution, you could actually sort of see some of the things he was talking about. And so when he unfortunately passed away, there was talk about cancelling The Sky at Night. And I was told that at that time, it was the most letters that the BBC had ever got in complaint. You cannot take away our Sky at Night. And so they decided they were going to continue, but they didn't know how to go about it. And so I did actually, this was my dream job. And so I did sort of send a little email saying, well, if there was any opportunity I'd love to do it. And I heard nothing. So I thought, okay, that's okay. But yeah, it's lovely that The Sky at Night continues. But then one day I was filming, I used to do a children's program called CBeebies Stargazing. And I was filming that in a sort of a house in Derbyshire. And I got a call saying, are you still interested in doing The Sky at Night? Oh, yes, I am. But it's funny, when I did the first episode, I was terrified because Patrick Moore was such an icon. Sir Patrick, we'd all grown up with him. And so to step into those very big shoes was absolutely terrifying. And it took a while to sort of get settled in. It's been 14 years. I'm getting there, but... But yes, but yeah, it was lovely that the programme continued. And also, of course, my co-presenter, Chris, because he made the transition. And so, yeah, working with him was lovely as well.
Well, let's, before we break for audience questions, talk about a few more crazy dreams that have come true. We talked about the clangers at the start. You've got to be part of the clangers. What was that like? And so I mentioned that in many of the interviews and talks I've given that I became a space scientist partly because of the clangers, because I used to watch them as a child. And so they rebooted the clangers a few years ago. And when they rebooted the clangers, they decided to make an episode and they put me in it. They made a little Maggie doll. And Laurie and I went to Altrincham, where they make the new clangers. And I met the woman who knits the clangers, and I held the suit dragon in my hand, and there were tears streaming down because this was my childhood dream coming true. And they made this episode called The Visitor, and it's available for free on YouTube. And it is, and when I watched it, I was just, but there was a little girl who's like, yes, because I made it to see the clangers. So yeah, crazy dreams can come true. And yes, I am in the clangers. You are in the clangers. You are also a Barbie.
Yes. As was mentioned at the beginning, I have my own Barbie doll. And it's because of Mattel. Every year they take 6 women from around the world and they role models that they see, and they will make them into a Barbie doll. And in 2023, the year of the Barbie movie, they invited me to make me in a Barbie doll. And I was gobsmacked, because again, it's that role model thing. But also, I was also worried that, what if I don't like the Barbie? Because, my daughter took photographs of me, and the photographs were sent to sort of headquarters, Mattel headquarters in California, and then they made the Barbie doll, and they were going to do the big reveal. Sort of, Maggie, this is your Barbie doll. And I thought, what if I don't like it? It's like getting socks for Christmas. Oh, thanks. But they did it, and they sort of, whipped off the blanket and said, Maggie, here's your Barbie doll. And I looked at it and thought, oh my God, the Barbie doll looks really like me, but it looks like me on a really good day. And that's how a Barbie doll should look.
And you mentioned Star Trek earlier. You have met some of at least one of your Star Trek heroes?
Yes, actually, the ultimate hero for me. Actually, I would have loved to meet Leonard Spock, but I did get to meet Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura. And she played such a major role in my childhood in terms of the idea of reaching for the stars. And also, in fact, when she was involved with NASA as well, when the space shuttle first came online and they were looking for astronauts that weren't, fighter pilots and people like that, she was also advertising and encouraging a wide range of people to apply. And so when I got to meet her, I was absolutely gobsmacked. And things I see myself as a professional, chatting to people, but you're so, oh, you're Yahora, it's you. So yeah, all professionalism went out to the window. But yeah, people say beware of meeting your heroes. I was so glad. She was wonderful, kind. I've got my favourite picture of all time is Nichelle Nichols sitting next to my lovely daughter Laurie when she was about 8 years old, and Laurie's holding a clanger. Can it get any better?
Can't get any. What a more perfect picture. And of course, very recently you have been awarded a damehood. You got to take your mum and your daughter, so 3 generations there. How did it feel to receive that honour?
Sometimes it feels like imposter syndrome because I go to say, oh, I know the real Maggie, but it felt wonderful at the same time. And the thing is, I think of sort of the dames I know, like Helen Mirren and Judi Dench and Kelly Holmes, as sort of people at the peak of their career. And I keep on thinking, I just talk about science a lot, and so it felt odd but magical at the same time. But also one of the challenges was it felt, oh my goodness, I need to live up to this. And so for the first 2 years I just threw myself into everything. If anyone said, Maggie, will you? Yes, I will. But it got really tiring. So I'm reining back a bit now. But it is just a lovely accolade to have. And unfortunately my father isn't here, but I think he really would have been proud. And so I feel it's for me, but it's for him as well, because of the sacrifices he made.
And my final question is, you talk in the book about there being many different Maggies. So what Maggie would you say you are now?
So it's quite interesting because I think in some ways the biography has helped me to explore myself. But it's also a time to sort of, okay, what next? And it's quite interesting because Laurie, she's 16 now, she's just done her GCSEs, she's becoming a young woman. And so where do I go next? And I'm still reaching for the stars. That will never change. That's been there all my life. But sometimes I think, so what ways might help me achieve this? And that's been one of the drivers in my life. One of the reasons I went on TV, I was like, if I'm a TV personality, maybe they'll send me into space. So it's always in the back of my mind. And at the moment, we're talking about sort of doing a collaboration between myself and my daughter. And so we are actually going out to Spain in a few weeks' time for the total solar eclipse, which one of the places we're going to in Spain is on totality. So it will be in totality for about a minute and a half. And I'm filming an hour programme with the European Space Agency. So that's a new venture for me. And I'm very excited about that. But while we're out there, we want to make videos about our road trip. And so low and mo on the road it is. And we're going to go to astronomical sites and to telescopes and just sort of enjoy the glorious planet. I call it Spaceship Earth. We are going to travel over Spaceship Earth, but every night look up at the night sky and see what we can see. But the ultimate plan, when Laurie turns 18, I turn 60. And so we have a plan to go on an epic global journey called 1860, sort of low and mo on the road, and just go into so we have the telescopes, the Gemini telescopes. Laurie's been to those and loved them. But the ELT, the Extremely Large Telescope, is coming online. Love to visit that. Just go, but also archaeoastronomy. I love the fact that every culture across the world has looked up at the night sky. It's something that unites us. So let's go out and explore that too.
I love that they're called the Very Large Telescope and the extra,
the extremely large telescope. The VLT, the Very Large Telescope, 4 8-metre telescopes. And now they are building the ELT, the Extremely Large Telescope. But the one I hope to see in my lifetime, which I don't know if we'll actually build, is called the OWL. And that's the Overwhelmingly Large Telescope. But if we do, the mirror will be 100 metres in diameter. I just imagine what we can see with that.
Amazing. Well, we're going to open up for some audience questions now. So hopefully we'll put some lights on so we can see everybody. I think we've got some roving microphones as well. Oh, there we go. We've got lots of lovely people.
I can see you now.
We can see you. So if you put your hands up, and then when I point to you, make sure you wait for the microphone to get you. So I can see we've got one on the very end here.
Hi, Maggie. Thank you so much for sharing your memories, because I've read it, I loved it.
Oh,
I was inspired right from the start when you talk about parallel worlds. So I have a two-part question. Oh, and also, we're born in the same year.
Oh, yes.
We both have a love of planners, but that's where the comparison ends, because I was not a scientist.
Sure, we've got lots more in common. Probably a love of the night sky.
With the parallel worlds, do you think it's ever going to be possible for us to meet ourselves?
Our doppelgangers.
Yeah, and the second part of the question, because you missed Dallas, do you know who shot JR?
Good question. So in terms of the sort of parallel universes, this again, it's sort of the stuff of science fiction, where you slip from one universe to the next. And it's funny because at the start of the book, I do thank all the other Maggies out there, and I hope they're having a good time, but I'm really enjoying being this one. But yeah, and the thing is that this brings out all sorts of interesting science. And it's interesting how our ideas have evolved in the last sort of 20, 30 years. Because, for instance, in the past, people used to say, what happened before the Big Bang? And we'll say, time was created with the Big Bang, so, it's hard to say what came before time. But now we're thinking with multiverses, maybe you can sort of contemplate or, interact with sort of another universe. And so, yes, so the science isn't there yet. It's the stuff of science fiction. But science fiction sometimes becomes science fact. And also, I think we can talk it on a macro level, big level, and sort of look at parallel universes. But stuff that's happening at the quantum level, things like string theory, where there are multiple dimensions tied up in subatomic particles, that opens up another possibility to get access to these worlds. So, yes, I don't know. But I do love the science fiction that explores it. Laurie and I, we have hyperfixations because we're neurodiverse. And Marvel was a hyperfixation in Doctor Strange, looking at the parallel universes. And so, yeah, I don't think we have the means of doing it yet. But yes, maybe in the future. And yes, I did find out who shot JR, but only because my family told me, because they were watching Dallas when I wasn't. I know. But thank you.
Right, next question, please. I'm looking. Oh, yes, we've got a question towards the back.
Back in the middle.
Thank you. Maggie, thanks for just being there, because you've been an inspiration to me ever since I first saw you.
Thank you so much.
The question is, as technology's improved over the last, probably, let's say the last 20, 25 years, and the quality of cameras, the quality of telescopes, available even to the public,
Yes.
has radically changed the way people would interact with things. And almost you feel, compared with even the life that you've come from, and certainly those who went before you,
Yes.
I suspect that a little bit of this imposter syndrome might come in, that you and I perhaps are looking at things which would have been impossible in their day.
Yes.
And yet it's all now because somebody in Japan made it or something like that.
Yes.
Where's the romance? Where's I'm not even saying the motivation, but what gives you back what they had?
Oh. But see, I love of night sky, I think, is something that, as you say, goes back. And I think it depends on the way you do it. And so, for instance, when I've had a really busy day and I'm stressed, and what I do is sometimes I just capture a glimpse of the moon, and suddenly I calm down. So for me, it's the moon for mindfulness. When I see the moon, it's just sort of, okay, I can relax. And I think so we can still get that from the night sky, but at the same time, we can take it further. I've just bought a piece of equipment which takes images of the night sky. So you say, take a picture of whatever, and it tracks across the night sky, and it will take multiple images and then bin them together to get some absolutely glorious images. I mean, images I think, oh my goodness, a large professional telescope would have taken that, but it's just a small unit. And so I think it's possible to see it on many different levels. There is just stepping outside. I live in Guildford, quite a bit of light pollution, but just stepping outside and looking up I'm thinking my ancestors have done this and I'm doing it too. But then there is the technology that can help us see it in even more detail. So I think it's not that one detracts from the other, but we can do it all. And hopefully in the future, as more technology comes in and AI takes a role and things like that, we can get even more. So I think they all live together. And it depends, if I don't have my telescope on me, I just look up and I take it in. If I have my sort of new piece of equipment, I can use that and get some glorious pictures. But it's all fantastic. And the thing that it always reminds me is we are part of something amazing. We are small and insignificant, but we are part of this glorious cosmos. And I don't mind if it's naked eye or a piece of equipment, but that's what it tells me.
Thank you for your question. Any more questions, please? Oh, yes, we've got one right the way down on the right-hand side.
Sorry, we don't mean to make you run in the heat.
Hello, Maggie.
Hello.
On I too grew up watching that Star Patrick Moore and loved him.
Yes.
And applaud you in going on Saturday night. You reminded me so much of him, your passion, enthusiasm.
My fast talking, yes.
No one's Patrick Moore, you just, he is the only person who comes close to you with the passion of it. Did you actually meet him?
No, I never did. And I would have loved to meet him. And of course, Chris Linter, my co-presenter, I met him many times and worked with him for many years, but I never got to meet him. And it's quite interesting because I was on the sky at night a few times as a space scientist talking about sort of my latest missions and things like that, but never got to meet him. So yes, so maybe in another, a parallel universe that happens, but unfortunately not in this one.
Any more questions? Yes, we've got one in the middle.
Oh, one over here as well.
Yes, we've got a couple. We'll come to the.
Actually, is my daughter going to heckle me from the back?
You mentioned themes of like the multiverse. Do you believe that there's like other life forms out there, or do you think we're alone in the universe?
Oh, one of my favourite questions. It's funny because last year I got a lovely opportunity because they do the Royal Institution Christmas lectures. And so last year was their 200th anniversary. They televised them, so they're on iPlayer. But for the 200th anniversary, I was talking about life out there in the universe and the search for it and how we use our scientific equipment today to look for life and how they've done so in the past. And to me, for us to think that we are alone in the universe is hubris. And the thing is, as humans, we are very much that way inclined. We are Earth, we're the centre of everything. Oh no, hold it, we go around the sun. Oh no, the sun is one of 300 billion stars in our galaxy. We are very insignificant, but we overestimate our importance. And again, I think the idea that we are alone in the universe is that to a T. Because I think, to me, it's just a numbers game. Because, as I say, 300 billion stars in our galaxy, and each one of those stars is a sun like our sun. And now we're detecting the planets going around those stars. We call them exoplanets. And as our equipment gets better, just as we were discussing, we are finding more and more of those exoplanets out there. And now we are, through what I call the science of the virtually impossible, we're actually able to analyse their atmospheres, if they have them, and see what the chemical composition of them is. And so now we are getting closer and closer to getting sort of indications of life on these other planets. And that's just within our galaxy. One of the things that the Hubble Space Telescope taught us is in the whole universe, there are around 200 billion galaxies. Why would life just occur here? It's like the multiverse. There's so many different branches. I think that life is definitely out there. But the other thing I think is that perhaps we won't recognise life even if we see it. And when I speak to younger kids, I always say that, we've got sort of the Perseverance rover trundling over the surface of Mars, and the Ingenuity helicopter, which was recently grounded but was hovering over Mars. And what happens is that there are these little red rocks which are alive, and then, shh, the Perseverance rover's coming, keep still, keep still. Okay, it's gone now, party! So there might be life there, but the definition of life is tenuous anyway, and we might not even recognise life if we saw it. So I think there's definitely life out there. And it's funny, I was brought up very religiously, My father was very religious, and my idea of heaven has evolved. But I think my idea of heaven now is a united federation of planets, that we have a universal consciousness, and we meet the aliens that are out there. But I also have a theory that the aliens are looking at us and thinking, oh dear, humans, and they're waiting for us to evolve enough where they'll actually make contact. But I am absolutely convinced that there's life out there.
I think we had some questions on the left-hand side. Yes.
Hello. You got it.
What parts of the web did you contribute in?
Oh, on the James Webb Space Telescope. Thank you. That's a lovely question. Well, see, now I always have to be very careful here because I contributed, but I was one of 10,000 scientists. So as you can imagine, I wasn't the key person. But what I was working on was the James Webb Space Telescope. They've got the telescope, it has a main mirror, which is 6.5 meters. And on the Christmas lectures, I talk about the challenge of getting that out into space because they had to fold it up to get it into space. And the James Webb Space Telescope sits 1.5 million kilometers away from planet Earth and looks into deep dark space because it picks up infrared light. So actually there's a lot of infrared in here because we're all very hot. But infrared light is a heat energy. And so the James Webb Space Telescope is a telescope that picks up heat energy. And so it needs to look away from the Earth and away from the sun. Now, with many telescopes, space telescope and otherwise, what you do is you have instrumentation on board, and the instruments will take the light gathered by the telescope and analyse it. And so on the James Webb Space Telescope, I think it's got 4 main instruments. One is MIRI, the mid-infrared instrument, but I worked on one called NIRSpec, which is the near-infrared spectrograph. And what it is, it's looking, so just like visible light, you've got red light at one end and blue light at the other. Infrared is the same. You have sort of your near infrared, far infrared, and sort of middle infrared. And so I was working at working on an instrument that was looking at the near infrared light. But it's quite interesting because sometimes molecules that you see in space, they absorb this infrared light and then re-emit it. And so it gives us an opportunity to sort of look at some of those molecules and identify some of those molecules. But as well as that, because we believe that the universe is expanding, visible light gets stretched into infrared light. And one of the things that the James Webb Space Telescope allows us to do is look back in time. And NIRSpec can help us do that. It picks up that infrared light, and we're able to analyse it and look at some of the very first stars and galaxies that were ever created after the Big Bang. So, and that's one of the books I'm working on at the moment, looking at the James Webb, but as a sort of like a time machine, looking back through time, because the light has taken so long to get to us. But it was a small part I played on the NIRSpec instrument, but I'm just very pleased to be part of such an amazing cohort of scientists and engineers from all around the world working together to understand the universe. It's wonderful being part of that group. But thank you for your question.
Do we have another question along that side? I thought I saw another hand go up. No? Any? Oh, yes, we have. Yeah, one.
Oh, actually,
at the front.
One here, and then
Okay, go to that one, and then we'll come down here.
Fantastic, thank you.
I really enjoyed your talk. Mine is probably a space question.
Please.
2 weeks ago, there was a talk about these marshmallow areas in space.
Sorry, the what areas?
The marshmallow.
Marshmallow?
Marshmallow areas.
Where they were gaseous masses with some debris in.
Oh.
So, do you think that in time they may develop into new planets?
Oh, I see. Actually, yes, reading is not my strong point, but I did hear, so one of the things that the James Webb Space Telescope is doing, because it's an infrared telescope, it can look at stellar nurseries. And so I'm not too sure where this sort of, this gas was, but depending on where it was, it could be a stellar nursery where new stars are being born. And when stars are born, planets form around them. And so, yes, looking at these stellar nurseries, they generally start off as large, sort of gaseous, we call them nebula. and then something disturbs them, like a supernova happening in nearby. Things start clumping together. The matter starts swirling due to conservation of angular momentum. They coalesce, and stars are formed, and new planets are formed. So maybe it's an area like that. But we do detect these places out there in space. Yes, so I'm quite interesting. I'm going to have to look up this marshmallow area because I don't know if it's sort of close by to us or sort of in a part of the galaxy far, far away from us. But we do have these pockets where stellar nurseries and new stars are being born. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but hopefully it gives us some indication.
We've got another question on this side, haven't we?
Yes.
Hi.
Hello.
I think it's really inspiring to see people like you coming here and talking about space because I really want to go into space science or space engineering or something like that.
Yeah.
And like where you were talking about trying to encourage young people to get into space and things, there wasn't many takers. I was thinking, maybe I want to do that.
Yeah, come on.
And I just wanted to ask, is there anything, like any advice that you would give other than like, you talked about having keeping a big dream, but is there any other advice that you would give to people like me aspiring to get into space science?
Yes. My first, well, not advice, but congratulations. You have chosen very well. And I'll say that for a number of reasons. A, it is a lovely career. And it's quite interesting because it's a very, very varied career. We were just talking about the James Webb Space Telescope and marshmallow areas, where new star formation is happening and new planets are formed. So it covers everything in the universe apart from planet Earth. So it's a good playing field. But on top of that, it's a great time to contemplate a career in space because there's so much happening. I mean, I think a few weeks ago, so Elon Musk became the world's first trillionaire when he was selling shares in SpaceX. And I was out in Hong Kong recently talking about space and how space science and space commercialization of space is escalating. And we have a shortage of space scientists. And it does pay quite well as well. and so there are all these different factors. But what we need is people just like you who have the dream, who want to sort of contribute, who have the passion to come and join us. And so and we have a shortage of space scientists in the UK. So the UK Space Agency keeps on advertising, but we're not getting enough people coming through. So you have chosen absolutely brilliantly, but pursue the dream. But really, and one of the things that I talk about in the book, and one of the things that it took me a long time to work out, is work out where your strengths and weaknesses lie. Because the space industry is a true industry. So we have PR, we have HR, we have everything in between, but we have the scientists and engineers and people like that as well, but also apprentices building satellites. So there's a smorgasbord of jobs available. So work out what makes your heart sing. There's something that I talk about in the book called Ikigai. And Ikigai is the Japanese art of life fulfillment. And it's a Venn diagram, and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but I'll give it a go. So it's a diagram, and it has 4 circles. And each circle represents a passion. What you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and the other one. Oh, okay. What you're good at, what you're good at. Oh, damn it, I can never remember. What you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, what you love. Thank you. Yes. And what you love. So work out what you love, what you're good at, what you can get paid. You can get paid for being a space scientist, but work out what flavour of space scientist you want to be. Because I tell you, there is I'd say a world of opportunity. It goes well beyond that. And the time is right now. It's such an exciting time. So welcome on board and congratulations.
Well, thank you so much for all of your questions. Please join me in thanking, though, once again, Dame Dr Maggie Aderin.